Well, it's that time again, that time when we walk most studiously into the virtual bar, meet up with Lisa and Lynn from the Lakeland Joint School District and discuss what's happening with our public schools in that district and some of the challenges they're facing. I'm joined by Ken today, and I'm your host, Chris, and this is Three Pastors Walking to a Bar. What's happening, Ken?
Not much.
It's actually two pastors today because we only have 4 microphones. So with Lisa and Lynn being here, we only have 2 microphones for 2 pastors. So, but Greg is here in spirit.
Yeah. He's right next door.
He is indeed.
Probably eavesdropping through the
He
vents.
could have taken my mic.
Nah, apparently someone thinks that you must be speaking today.
That's right.
I would listen to her because she kind of knows what she's talking about sometimes.
Yeah.
So It is indeed time for everybody's new favorite portion of the show. We like to hype it up because it's really, really exciting. And ever since we've introduced it, it's people just, they can't get enough of it.
Do we have the fanfare yet over there, Ethan?
Oh yeah, aren't we supposed to get like a drum roll or something, or like a
We got to work on that.
Yeah. We got to get you working on the sound effects a little
We
bit.
got to get that studio audience
Yeah.
tuned up.
Yeah, that works too.
Oh,
Yeah. All right. Well, it's time for the disclaimer, folks. You guessed it.
I don't
Ken?
know. Do you think we need a disclaimer today?
Yeah.
We're going to get on.
Oh, yeah. You never know what
really
these guys are
rocky
going to say.
waters here. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the respective speakers and do not necessarily reflect the opinions, policies, or doctrines of Athol Baptist Church and its members.
Amen, brother. Yes. Oh, boy. All right. So last time we talked with Lisa Arnold, it was back in 2022, and she had just won the election as superintendent for Lakeland Joint School District. I keep forgetting that it's joint.
It's joint, yeah.
Yeah. It's like I can never remember that it's got that extra.
We serve a lot of communities, so.
There's a lot of communities.
Mm-hmm.
So it's in Kootenai and Bonner. That's why it's joint, right? Because it's between 2 counties?
No, it's joint because it's Hauser Lake, Rathdrum, Spirit Lake, Athol.
All the cities.
Several different
Oh, wow.
communities, separate cities and communities.
So is that like an official structure in the school district world that you are joint if you're serving multiple communities and you're disjointed if you don't?
Possibly. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
We'll go with that.
Yeah.
Why not?
We just made up a new definition.
Yeah.
Hey, why not?
Don't get bent out of joint.
Yeah, I mean, we need more definitions for sure. And at that time, we discussed a lot of issues important to parents about their children's educations. We talked about parental rights, racial equity, gender identity indoctrination, performance standards, staff shortages, school choice, homeschooling, and levies, plus many other things that were included in that. Today, we welcome Lisa and Lynn back to the podcast for an update on those issues and more that's taken place since she's been in office. And so, you know, I guess like to start with, how are things going over there?
Well, we're keeping really busy. I would say we have lots of successes this year. Our kids are doing really well. Probably the biggest challenge for us right now is declining enrollment, which is happening across the state of Idaho. So we spent the last couple of weeks working with the board and our CFO to trim $2 million from our budget from this year to next year to account for continuing declining enrollment and a change in the way the state is funding schools.
We're projected about 125 kids down, so we have more graduating seniors than we have kindergartners coming in.
Yep.
Wow.
That was surprising when I first heard that because I would have expected it to continue to be growing.
That's what we thought, since COVID, we've had so many people moving into North Idaho, but a lot of the people are retired and wanting to come here. That's a nice place to be. Mm-hmm. And then we have families because of the median home cost in Rathdrum prior to COVID was $150,000, and it's now over $400,000. And so families with young children who are just really starting out are struggling to find housing in our
can't
area.
afford to live here, and there aren't any rentals available, so that's a struggle. And rentals now, if you find one, they're $2,500 plus a month.
Yep.
Yeah, it's kind of ridiculous. I mean, we've had to do some things for our family just to have places for our children to land, because you just can't afford to move out anymore, not unless you got like 6 roommates.
Right.
Yeah, so it's a little obnoxious.
Yeah.
So things are going pretty well, you'd say, other than the declining. Is that like the biggest challenge you're facing, is the declining enrollment?
Budget is always challenging, but Lakeland is a district where we really champion parental rights, and so things happen and we have to kind of adjust or kind of figure out how to deal with certain topics as they come up, because there's always something that's just right around the corner that you have to address. But we've got lots of different committees parents are participating in. They definitely have a strong voice in the way policy is being written in our district, and so we just continue to honor our parental rights and do the best we can for the kids, because they are not our children, they are our parents' children, and so it's important to us that we can work together in partnership.
You might be one of the only groups of leaders for public schools that believe that, actually. I think most public school boards and leaders believe that they are better qualified to raise people's children than they are. Children than they are. Yeah, and it's refreshing to hear that. I think that people need to hear that more often. I do want to talk about a lot more about some of the positive things that are going on in the school district, because there's plenty of things to fuss about if people want to fuss. I mean, we've seen that over the recent history, but I do want to address the elephant in the room for those of our listeners that are out there that are wondering about the recent event at Athol Elementary. I think it'd be great to give you guys the opportunity to speak to that, and to just give people kind of the final, like, look, this is what happened, this is what we did, and this is where we're at. So that it's out there and then people can refer to it. And then, the people that will continue to just fuss and yell will have to do that over what's actually put out there. I did see your notice that you did put out, your post that you did put out. But for those of our listeners that are out there that are wondering, because a lot of them didn't even know, honestly. And then when the people that did know, they came up to me asking me, it's like, well, what did happen? So what did happen?
Well, the Missoula Children's Theater company is a company we've used in Lakeland for over 20 years. I definitely, as a principal, had them come to my school, and they the way it works is you work with the company to decide what play you want to bring to the school, and then pick a date. And they send usually 2 or 3 staff members, depending on how big the play is going to be. It's the principal's responsibility to find housing for them when they're here. And then they work with kids after school for about a week to teach the songs, teach the script, and help them with the markings on stage and how to perform.
So this wasn't something that was like on a whim.
No.
This is something that's been going on for a long time.
Long time, yep. And it's been wildly successful. Parents love it. And so the principal at Athol Elementary, that particular school has been very consistent in their use of this group. So the principal reached out and set up a date for them to come and teach the kids the play Treasure Island. And they send the
which Treasure Island seems pretty ambiguous.
Right.
He
Yep.
was just trying to bring some fine arts to the kids and have some exposure to fine arts.
Yeah, and we have, we have populations of people who can't afford to take their kids into Coeur d'Alene to participate in these kinds of things. So, we try to bring things to the schools for kids to have something other than just academics. So they sent the principal all the information, and that included a bio for the people who came. I wasn't aware of any of it until after the whole thing kind of happened. But one of there were 2 staff members who came. One of them happened to be transgender. You couldn't tell from the picture that was sent, and I after the fact just glanced at the picture. I didn't read the fine print. So at the bottom, under the one picture, it did say gave some credits of plays that this person had participated in, and they were male roles. Danny Zuko from Greece is the one that I can remember off the top of my head. So they were there. They worked with the kids. The parents of the kids who participated in the play.
But that's not an indicator in and of itself,
right?
Like, I've been in theater a while,
It's
and
pretty common
it's
that you
not
play multiple roles.
Yeah, it's not uncommon for men to play women's roles and women to play men's roles.
Right.
That's pretty common.
Yeah, the one that stands out to me is Peter Pan.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So anyway, the parents of the children who participated in the play were very happy with the entire experience. They felt like it was well run, and the kids were well prepared to actually perform the play, which they did on the Saturday before Mother's Day. But there were people in the audience that day who were concerned about the fact that there was a transgender person there.
Now, how did they know he was there?
Well, apparently, while he looked like a lady, he had a pretty deep voice, I think was
Okay, so he was full on, like,
Mm-hmm.
presenting as female.
Yes, and when you look at his picture or her picture,
it's his. It's his. Yeah.
It looked like a woman. So it wasn't like it was a man in a dress with some, facial hair and makeup or anything. He looked like a woman. So, but that was problematic for parents in the audience.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And so there was somebody, I don't know if they were there or they heard, but I think what's most problematic for us is that instead of reaching out and asking the question, people go to social media and make a very inflammatory kind of post, and it gets everybody stirred up, and then it's really hard to kind of bring the temperature down a little bit to where we can have a rational conversation, but which is why I put out the message that I did. So we, again, really believe in parental rights, and the parents of the kids who participated in the play definitely had the option of saying, this doesn't work for me and I'm not going to have my child participate. But the people in the audience weren't aware until they got there, and I think that was what the problem was. So... and there, we heard from people, somebody mentioned that we should have sent the bio out to all the homes at Athol Elementary saying, this is, Miss So-and-so, formerly known as, Josh. But
you wouldn't have known that from the bio.
No.
It's not like he had it listed in his bio that I'm a trans man and that.
No.
Yeah.
And it's not even on, because our person who monitors social media for us went out to Missoula Children's Theater to look on their page to see what kind of information they provide. And it was the same information that was provided to us. So she actually had to go kind of dig out there in the social media world to see if she could kind of track that down. So
I can tell you what people's response to that's going to be. When the principal saw that this person was obviously presenting as female but was obviously a male, why did the principal not put a stop to it?
Well, that's a really hard place for us. And I did reach out to our attorney because I wanted to make sure that there are laws that we have to follow.
Right.
And so doing what you're suggesting in the world of the law is discriminatory. And there actually is language in the contract about, not harassing people. And because the people who were participating, those parents were aware and they had the opportunity to choose whether or not their kids participated, she didn't think she needed to do anything beyond that. Those parents were able to opt in or out with knowledge. And so it was more the community that was coming to watch that. And, I talked to several parents and just asked them, talk to me a little bit about why this was so concerning for you, because your kids didn't interact with these people. And what they shared with me, and this makes a lot of sense, is that when somebody who doesn't quite look like a female person, but we're introducing that person as Miss So-and-so, it feels a little bit like we're normalizing that behavior. And parents want to be able to be the ones to have those conversations with their kids. They just don't want those controversial issues at the school level. So what we need to figure out is how do we make sure moving forward that if we're going to do these kinds of activities after school, that we know who's coming so that we can address it before they arrive. Because once they were here, it became a little bit problematic for the principal to just say, I'm sorry, this doesn't work for us, and you're going to have to go.
Unfortunately for us, I just think we have tried really hard for the last 2 years to have controversial or social justice issues or any of the propaganda that's happening in our world not to have an impact at our school level, so that parents are getting to make all of those decisions. And, we just have to do a better job of, I think we just assume like it's not going to happen because this is our community and everybody has the same values. And so we're definitely looking at systems and protocols of how do we make sure to the best of our ability we're keeping all of that out of our schools. So really parents get to make the decisions for their kids, and we're not normalizing or exposing kids to things when their parents don't have the ability to have that conversation.
Yeah, I wish
that's the goal.
Yeah, for sure. I wish people were having more of a conversation about the work that's gone into the changing of curriculums and the removing of books from libraries and all the work that you guys have done to remove diversity, equity, and inclusion from the school system, gender ideologies and things like that. It's going to creep in. Honestly, I'm a harsh opponent of public school systems. I think they're failed. They're going to continue to fail. And I think the saving of them is not likely. But that being said, if we've got some good, godly people that are in there working, maybe you can salvage, a few kids out of it. I mean, it just seems like a worthy goal to be working in that system. But it's weird to me that people can't see, or they don't want to see the things that are happening that are positive. They'd much rather outrage. Outrage seems to be the course of the day.
I think part of that is the people we hear from the most are the people who've moved here. They're not the people who have been here, who have known our district for such a long time and know who we are and what we're about, because we haven't changed. We are the same Lakeland that we were when I started in 1991. We've always held these conservative values. We've always believed in our parents' rights to raise their kids. But these people are coming from places where they've watched public schools fail and change.
Wow. That is really interesting.
And so anytime there's any glimpse of something infiltrating our system, they have this huge response to it because they're so afraid that what happened where they came from is going to happen here.
Kind of sets off their scholastic PSD.
Yes.
Or
so
PTSD.
Is their assumption then that you're complicit in this and not negligent? That there's malice behind it? You're trying to advance an agenda?
I don't know if... I honestly don't know. I don't think that that's what they feel. I think what they're
I think there's
doing
a
is
small
trying,
percentage of people that might think that.
Yeah, but I think most of them are trying to protect what's here because they've seen what can happen if you don't, and so but their response is just a little bit bigger maybe than sometimes it needs to be. And they are coming from a place where they weren't allowed in the schools. They never had interaction with the superintendent. People, if they went to the principal, they didn't feel like they were listened to. And so they're not used to the open door policy that we have. And so instead they go straight to social media. Yeah. So we just keep coming back and trying to work with all of our parents because ultimately in this district, we all want the same thing.
The moral of the story is have a conversation with someone.
Yes. Before we hit social media, you may have a conversation with us and not like what we have to say. In this situation, there were people who said, why didn't you just send them home? And legally we couldn't. So that's the answer. And some people didn't like that answer. So, I understand that. But but after that is this exposed an area of weakness for us that we have to address.
Yeah,
so
that
that
now
we know who's coming.
Yeah, you can create policy to get that on the front end.
Right.
Instead of having to deal with the legal ramifications of trying to get it taken care of.
Because one of the things as I agonized over this, one of the things my husband pointed out to me is, as a superintendent, you're making decisions. You can't make decisions knowingly violating the law, because if there were ever to be any kind of a lawsuit on either side of this conversation, and I have broken the law knowingly or even not, the suit will name me, but the district's insurance won't cover me because the court will find me negligent. So that then falls directly on me, any kind of monetary fine or anything. So we can't knowingly break the law. So we have to be on the front end a little bit more.
What law are we talking about? What law does it? Is it that
Title
specific?
9.
Is it Title IX? Mm-hmm. So they're protected under Title IX.
Oh yeah, it's a protected class under Title IX, and so all of the anti-discrimination language that everybody's required to have because of Title IX. As a district, we have it. It's on our website. It's on our applications. It's everywhere, and you can't discriminate.
Was that recently enacted?
No.
Sounds familiar, like a lot of the legislation that's been discussed and debated down in Boise the last couple of years.
Well,
Title IX is federal, right?
Federal.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And Boise, actually, Idaho has in the last couple of legislative sessions written and passed laws that actually are contradictory to Title IX. 3 of those laws are currently at the Ninth Circuit Court level, and we're hearing that all 3 of them are going to be found unconstitutional.
Sure. Oh, sure.
So that'll be an interesting place for public schools to be in this state because, Idaho will decide whether they're going to repeal the laws or if they're going to stay on the books. And if they stay on the books, then we've got state law that contradicts federal law. So no matter what you do, you're
lose-lose.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So
it's definitely a fine line we're walking where we want parents to have, every right to govern their own children. We 100% believe that it's, I'm a mom first, Lisa's a mom first. I want to make those decisions for my own child, and I know that all the parents want the same, but we also want to be kind and, do right by our kids, but also, as we navigate some of these social issues, just how do we, follow the law, but also do it with grace and dignity and,
Boy, if there was ever an argument for the negativity created by the federalization of the education system, that's it. I mean, our community should be able to determine what is right for our school systems, not the federal government. It yet again, another reason why I am a fierce opponent of public schools. I don't think they work. They're failing our kids, and we keep pumping money into this failing system. And some are better than others. Obviously, the schools that you guys are working in are doing a fabulous job. But man, federally, that is not the case. And it's just a shame, that we're talking about, some guy in a dress at a play instead of talking about why are we taking federal money for our school systems in the first place.
Well, we could opt out of the federal dollars for the school system, but if we do that, the state loses all federal dollars, which means all the roads, all the infrastructure, all of those kinds of dollars go away too. It's a lot of money.
Yeah.
So if Idaho could figure out how to do that, it would be.
Well, they keep getting enough retirees in. We might be able to do it. That's the advantage. There is a demographic problem when you start losing all the kids.
Absolutely.
But all the gray hairs have the money, so
and don't need jobs.
So there's something to be said for that.
Well, and for the last few years, we have had a surplus in Idaho, so
yeah,
as a state.
Yeah, in fact, I was looking at one of the things that had gotten passed in this last legislative session, which appropriated, what was it, $1 billion?
$1.3 billion for facilities. Is that what you're?
Well, it appropriates $1.061 billion and 6,277 full-time positions to support the maintenance of current operations in the State Board of Education budget group for fiscal year 2025.
Yeah, that's salaries and benefits for staff.
So that's salaries and benefits for like maintenance staff, or is it all tiers?
That's just the maintenance operation portion of the budget for the district. So it's salaries and benefits, basically a little bit of discretionary money, which isn't really discretionary. It's more operational because it pays our electric bills and those kinds of things. But then separate from that, there was a very large appropriation this year for facilities for public schools.
Okay, so there are some positive things going on for sure. A little bit more funding.
How does that mesh with the $2 million? I mean, that makes Lakeland's $2 million reduction seem like a drop in the bucket, right? But you, it has different ramifications.
Right. So the way the state funds public education is a very complex formula. But so they take all of our people. We have 271 teachers paid out of our general fund. They look at our enrollment and put it through the formula and tell us that the state's going to pay us for 219 teachers. So we have 271. They pay us for 219. They put all of our 271 on their salary schedule, which is significantly less than ours. All the stipends that the state gives, they add all of those salaries together and divide by 271 to get what they call a weighted average. And then they take that weighted average, which for Lakeland is 60,000, and they multiply that times the 219 teachers that they're going to pay for. So in reality, for us, we got 48,000 for every teacher that we employ, which is the first rung on our salary schedule, and that's not where all 271 people live. So they're throughout the salary schedule. So the supplemental levy that we have to run pays the difference between what the state gives us and what we actually pay. So part of the reduction of $2 million is just starting to scale back on how many staff we have. So during COVID, there was a lot of federal dollars that flowed, and we used those dollars to add staff so we could increase the social distancing because Lakeland was open 5 days a week through that whole COVID mess. But we didn't scale backwards when COVID kind of became not as big of an issue. And so that's part of the work that we have to do to get closer to that number that the state provides for us, knowing that we won't ever be exactly there because we do run small neighborhood schools instead of larger schools. So we could shut down 2 elementary schools and move those 700 to 800 kids into the 4 remaining schools. We could shut down a high school and have a high school of 1,400 instead of 2 that are smaller, to look a little bit more like everybody else does. But in this community, we've always just really supported the small neighborhood schools. Allows kids to be known, gives them a lot more opportunities.
All the adults know who the kids are.
Yep.
The other piece to that is being so close to Washington. We can't be competitive with wages if we pay exactly what the state. We wouldn't be able to keep teachers because they can already, even with what we pay them, it's a $20,000 bump if you go to Washington automatically. So 15 to 20. So we have to be competitive.
Yeah. So that's part of, I guess, the reduction for us is we went from enrollment funding where we have 4,300 kids enrolled, so they paid for all of them, to now average daily attendance. And since COVID, our average daily attendance is about 92% of our kids are at school on any given day. So they're paying us for 92% of our 4,300 instead of fully funding the 4,300.
I was hoping to make it through this whole podcast without using the word COVID.
Well, I mean, it had massive effects on you guys. If you scaled back for it and then you didn't scale reverse, you're running at a greatly reduced, kind of budgetary system than you were when you went into it. So, yeah, it's not good. Yeah, so it
we're
definitely
working on it.
And that closing schools would be traumatic to those communities, wouldn't it?
Oh, terribly. And then how do you we couldn't move Lakeland kids up to Timberlake. It's not big enough. You'd have to move Timberlake kids to Lakeland, which still isn't big enough. But how do you close a fairly new school, relatively speaking, beautiful school, and not utilize that and put everybody into one? But
they're closing Coeur d'Alene, one in Coeur d'Alene, right?
Multiple districts across the state are closing schools
for
that sole reason when they moved from enrollment to ADA. So, and then there's the big push for some districts are going to the 4-day work week, school week, to save money.
Wild. Is this likely to have an effect on the levies that you run in the future?
Well, there are a lot of things that are going to affect the levy, which we have to rerun next year. We're going to talk about that at the board meeting at the end of this month. But my recommendation to the board is that we run it in November. The state, we used to have 4 dates that we could use. The state has removed 2, so it's either November date or May. And my push has always been to try to get as many people to vote so that we can really clearly see what the voice of the communities are as far as whether or not they want to support that. And this is an election year next year, so there will be a lot of people out voting, and it will give us a good perspective on where our patrons land with regard to the levy. But it's a huge, we spent days trying to figure out how to cut $2 million from the budget. And so to try to cut $9.52 million, if the levy doesn't pass, that's when we have to start talking about closing schools. That's the only way that you can do it.
Yeah. So then after the levy, whether it passes or not, that's when the conversation will begin about
what we do. I think the thing that's going to be most challenging for us is the facilities side of what the state allocated last year. So House Bill 292 provides dollars for the maintenance of our buildings, but at the last minute they added some language to that bill before it finally passed and went to the governor's desk, which makes it a property tax relief first. So if you have a bond or a supplemental levy or a plant facility levy on the books, you have to actually use your maintenance of facilities allocation to offset the cost to your patrons of your measures that are on the ballot. And then last year there was a property tax relief bill. So for Lakeland, it's $3.3 million. And because we run a supplemental levy, so we won't ever get that facilities maintenance money as long as we continue to have these on the books. Within the entire state of Idaho, there is only one school district this year that would get that facilities money. Everybody else would have to be applied to their what they tax their patrons. So for us, it's $3.3 million. If we go out and and let our patrons know that we're going to run the 9.52 if that's what the board decides. But it's actually only going to cost you, $6 million. That will sound good to people, but then when you get to the ballot, we can't put that language on there.
Right.
We're not allowed to say that there's this $3.3 million of tax relief that would be applied. So we can talk about that and talk about what it means for your taxes, but then you get to the ballot and it looks like we're not being honest because the language
there's just
doesn't
miscommunication
match.
if people aren't informed.
Yeah. So that's going to be a little bit challenging for us. And then in addition to that, there was House Bill, I think 521, which provides for bigger dollars for renovating and building buildings. And the state's actually going to sell bonds to cover. That's the $1.3 million that I was talking about earlier. And so for Lakeland, that's about $18 million that we can get in one lump sum to be able to do some work on the buildings we have currently, to bring them up to speed a little bit. We have some buildings that were built in the 60s that don't have the electrical capability of really running a school the way it needs to be run today. So,
and then we have old HVACs, but there are definitely regulations to that money. So, and how it can be spent, and it has to be specific to facility. So, most schools, I don't think any schools will be able to build schools. It will just be maintenance of getting them back up to par.
Seems like it was basically intended to be a tax relief bill, because it's kind of incentivizing you to use it to relieve the taxes as opposed to using it for facilities.
Right. Well, it's not even incentivizing; it's mandatory.
Yeah.
We don't get to choose.
Well, you could pick if you didn't run a levy, you could keep it.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. So
we have to work ourselves out of that supplemental levy.
Yeah, but I mean, you're talking $3 million versus $9 million. I mean, it's like it really does incentivize you to do levies, but to relieve the tax burden with the state money.
The issue for us is we've always run a plant facility levy in this district, which allows us to take money to actually pay for the maintenance of our buildings, and that's what that House Bill 292 is intended for. Is this is state money for maintenance of facilities, but it's going to go to tax relief first. So we're not going to get if we don't run a plant facility levy, there is no money for maintenance of buildings. So that's going to be an interesting kind of place to be.
It seems to me like the tax relief is unnecessary, though, with the amount of population that's moving in, because of the way that the Idaho does its property taxes. I mean, I'm maybe in the minority. My property appraisal went through the roof, but actually my property taxes went down. Just because of the sheer number of people that have moved into the community. Most people are going to find that their property taxes did not go up, but maybe a marginal amount. I don't know of anybody that got hammered with an exorbitant property tax.
Yeah.
And so I think people understanding that, first of all, how property taxes work in Idaho is way different than where they're from. And then understanding the $3 million that's going to go to subsidize it. And then the necessity for the salaries to keep the teachers that we want. I mean, are the three. It seems like the three pieces that must be communicated in order to make that successful.
Yep.
Because I'm wondering what a $9 million levy would actually do to my property taxes.
Well, that's what you have right now is a $9.5 million that's on your books right now. So 4 or 5 years ago, I think our tax rate for Lakeland was $4.53 for every $1,000 of taxable value of your property. The last number I saw for projected for next year is 92 cents. So
because of the number of people that have moved into our community.
Exactly. And the reason that people's taxes aren't going way up when their property value goes way up is because everybody's property value went way up. So if yours had been the only one, you would have seen an increase in taxes. But
it's not a singular.
It's the entire county.
But inflation is hitting everybody. I mean, even our classified staff, we try to be competitive, but you have Taco Bell and McDonald's right next to us that have signs that will say $17 an hour, $18 an hour, and it's really hard to hire.
Yeah. That's not sustainable for them, though. And they can't find people to work those jobs anyways. And most of them are going to like electronic kiosks and things like that because even at that rate, you can't get people to work there. It's
sustainable, right?
It's just not sustainable as business owners. So they'll move into different. It'll modernize the workplace. It really will. So I mean, it is. We thought about that too here. We have some part-time employees that we employ here, and you can come here and you can work for this amount, or you can go down to McDonald's and work for the same amount. Right. It's like it's like you think that it's like, well, we're competing with McDonald's, but the thing about it is that the people that will come and work at Lakeland Joint School District for $17, $18 an hour are not the people that will go down and fill a taco shell for $17, $18 an hour. It's a different group of people.
The people that come and want to work for us love kids.
Yeah.
And they just want to do right by kids.
Yeah. And you need to be competitive to keep good teachers. But I mean, what we've seen from Washington is that it doesn't matter how much money you throw into a system. The money itself does not increase the rate at which it improves. I mean, just money doesn't do it. It's the people involved. And, you want to definitely keep the people that are dedicated to the system for sure.
There was an article recently and they did a study, and I believe it was Amazon, where they years back raised their minimum wage to $15 an hour. That was so controversial. And they interviewed those people recently, and they said they are now struggling to buy food and to make their rent payments.
Yeah.
Even though their wages have gone up.
Well, that's the way inflation works.
Inflation's in there, but also, your lifestyle standard raises to fill that.
The more you have, the more you spend.
That's right.
Yeah.
But I don't think minimum wage was ever really intended to be a livable wage, I think.
No.
So, and that's kind of, that's also kind of a new phenomenon where we have a lot of people working minimum wage jobs, and they are trying to live on that.
Well,
there aren't that many entry-level jobs anymore.
Right.
Well, not in our community, that's for sure. And that's going to be a really big problem that our community leaders are going to have to deal with. I mean, not only are you going to have schools struggling to keep up their demographics, but you're going to have kids that are going to be willing to mix a milkshake and, cut a lawn. And you need that youth to do that. And when you don't have them to hire,
because they can't afford to be here.
Exactly. I mean, what are you going to do? You'll eventually start regressing. So it's something that our community leaders are definitely going to have to deal with. And I'm interested to find out, what our county commissioners think about how they could zone or what they could do to begin to attract in families with children, as opposed to just continuing to bring in this kind of wave of retirees that's driving our demographic into the 60 to 80 range.
Well, college graduates can't even come back here. They can't afford to entry-level jobs, even if they have a 4-year degree.
Yeah.
And I heard NIC is struggling for registrations too, right?
Well, there's no kids.
Yeah.
There's no kids, man. It's like
they started building a lot of apartments around our area, and even within Lakeland, we've got apartments going up. But it's for 20-somethings who are renting an apartment together because that's the only way they can afford to live here.
Yeah,
So it's not families with young
and
children.
Unfortunately, the market is not going to allow those landlords to reduce their rents, because then you're just opening it up for low-income housing at that point. So it's quite a conundrum. I would not want to be a county commissioner in this world that we live in today. That's for sure. So how is the whole library thing going? Because you guys really championed that. You took it on, and you have instituted quite a few things like parents being involved with the, looking of it or the review of the books and things of that nature. How's that going for you guys? Where are you guys at with that whole process?
I think we've done a really good job with that, with a lot of input from parents and community members. So one of the things that we instituted is that as part of the registration packet, parents get to opt their kids into, not out of, but into, so it's an active participation by the parents, into different genres in the library. So we have some families who are fine with their kids reading Harry Potter and some families who absolutely don't want that. So they can say, I'm opting my kids into biographies, nature books, and, just the ones that they feel really comfortable with. And then that information goes into our system. And if a kiddo tries to check out a book that doesn't fall within those genres, there's a notice that comes up for the librarian, and she just lets the child know that, sorry, you can't check out this book. So it puts the parents in the driver's seat. And then we've worked really hard.
We're now tackling the classroom library and any novels that are used for book studies in the classroom. And so we've been actively working on, there was new legislation around the library. So we're trying to put all of those parameters in place, and then just even going a little bit deeper and we're going to establish an official library committee of parents and community members that are actually reading books if we're talking about using it for an instructional tool.
Mm-hmm.
We already have kind of a supplemental curriculum committee that looks at all curriculum, library included, for novels, but we're going to just kind of have two committees now. That's, I think, the route we're going to go, and looking solely just at library books for instructional purposes, and also classroom library, so parents are having more input and more involvement as to what we're using.
Most people probably wouldn't even realize that those are two separate things. Like, you have a library that kids can go to, and then some teachers elect to have small libraries in their classroom.
It's really important at the kindergarten, first, second grade level, even third, to have those classroom libraries, because you're teaching kids how to read, and you need them to generalize the skills that you have taught them. And the only way to do that is to actually read a book. So you have to be able to put books in their hands.
We're trying to be transparent about all of those things so that parents are aware that this is where access could be, and so we have systems and parameters around access so that parents are involved in that process.
Right.
So we have just tried to, this is the next layer, so we implement a little bit, get that going, and then we're adding the next layer. So I feel like we've been really diligent trying to be transparent. It's not perfect. I think we still get, phone calls about, we just found a series that was in a library and we're going to shelve it until somebody can read it. It's questionable. And so then we are, trying to do our due diligence.
Yeah.
So it's a work in progress.
Yeah, I was going to say it has to be a work in progress, because if you dedicated yourself to it, it's all you would do.
Right. Because we have tens of thousands of books across the district. And I think we've been really responsive. So when, we had one community member who has done a lot of research and looking at books that definitely should not be available to children. And I think we actually were at Athol Baptist when she first brought her list, and we were reading some of the little snippets of pages, and I just remember thinking, oh my goodness, this is terrible. I would never want my child to read this. So we have been really diligent about going through and removing those books that we think are harmful to kids. And, if parents want their child to read that book, they can go to the public library, but we're not going to have it in a public school library. So
have other districts near us actually taken any kind of measures like that before the House passed the library? What's the name of that legislation? It was the
materials harmful to children or something.
Yeah, something like that. The Library Porn Act, basically, is what people are calling it.
We had not really heard from it. Hasn't been a conversation at the superintendent level for Region 1, which is our North Idaho region. Lynn and I have shared what we've been doing, but nobody's saying, oh yeah, we're doing that too. So they'll have to start doing that work because of this this bill. The other thing that I think is really important, I think, for our parents to know is that when you talk about having novel sets in the classroom and teachers are teaching from them, for me, it's really important that if we're going to do that, that we're not choosing books that have anything that's controversial in them, because if we have a book that we know some parents aren't going to be comfortable having their kids read, we're automatically taking those 5 kids out of instruction for 4 to 6 weeks, and they're sitting in a library doing independent study on a different book. They're not learning at the same level as everybody else. And so I think we owe it to our kids to make sure that we're being mindful of that and choosing books that all parents are going to be comfortable with their kids reading, so that they all can benefit from the instruction. And, we're a public school, so we've tried very hard to keep controversial issues out of our classrooms. That's not what we're about.
You guys were ahead of your time when it came to that, obviously, because you guys were addressing that before the Library Porn Act was passed. But the advantage of that is that it now kind of gives you a kind of community morality that you can now focus on to say these are the books that aren't allowed. Because it occurs to me that if you just open it up to, like, say, parents being able to just say, I don't want this book or I don't want that book or whatever, most people are going to be like, yeah, we don't want the ones with transgenderism or homosexuals or talking about, physical, ways that we can manipulate our bodies and all this other kind of stuff. But then you're going to have that small group of people that are going to be like, I don't want anything with magic in it. I don't want anything with, you just pick your poison, right? And then you start having to get rid of books like Harry Potter and, things like that. So I think it's kind of good, actually, to have kind of a community moral standard that you can look at, like a universal standard that says these are the books that are not allowed in public school libraries.
Yeah, the bill did a good job of defining what those are. So,
yep.
But I think as, just as we try to navigate this new world, and even several years ago, as people have brought things to our attention of there's a concern, I feel like we've been really responsive in, okay, let's, with the hat on of I'm a parent first, am I comfortable with my child reading this, or am I comfortable with my, child being exposed to this, and then being able to put parameters in place that we're giving parents the ability to make those decisions. So as it's, I feel like we've tried to open it up where people are coming alongside us and pointing things out to us. We're not perfect. We don't do it all, we don't always do it right. But as things get highlighted, then we're trying to be responsive so that we're putting something in place so that we are protective, but we're also, it's protective for parents to be able to have a voice in that. So, next year there will be something else. So, but as we hear about it, we're not burying it or just like, well, it's not on anyone's radar. If we hear about it, we're trying to be responsive.
Be responsive, but still work within the parameters of the fact that this is a public school,
right?
Not a religious
school. We have laws
school.
We have to follow for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the hardest part, I think, for people who particularly are believers to grab a hold of, is understanding that this is a public secular school. This is not a private school, right? You have other kids that are going to this school that have the ability to do whatever, right? And so I think it's going to take a level of understanding from Christian parents to be able to say, you're sending your child to a public secular school. They are going to be exposed to public secular things. If they introduce a book, say, for instance, like a Hunger Games or whatever, in a high school setting for kids to read and do a book report on, but you don't like that because it's dystopian or because it's like whatever, right? Probably the best thing for you to do as a Christian parent would be to sit down with your kid with that book and go over, well, what do you think is wrong about this? Right? What do you, it's a teaching moment. You don't always have to guard your children against everything that they're ever going to be exposed to. Sometimes it's good to let them be exposed to things that are outside of your belief structure, because it gives you the ability to say, okay, philosophically, why is this wrong? What can we glean from this that's going to make you a better person in the future? And I would challenge, Christian parents to be more on that side. If you're going to send your kid to public school, you should be on that side. If you're going to be on the side of there shouldn't be anything there that I don't agree with religiously, you should send your kid to private school. Yeah.
I agree with you, and I think when we do that, when we sit down with our kids and talk through things that don't maybe align with our family values and beliefs, we are actually giving our kids some coping strategies, because as young adults, when they leave the house and they go off to college or whatever they're going to do with their lives, they're going to run into some of these things, and if we can equip them to be able to think through how do I want to deal with this. I think we make stronger, better prepared young adults.
I think they have the ability to discern in a way that it's not just regurgitated what we said. I mean, some of those conversations, I know with my own boys, it's been really, as things have, and I would tell you, I think it's when you go to the grocery store, they've been to restaurants. You can't get away from some of this. And so being able to navigate just what they hear on the news, what they hear, from their peers when they go to work. And so being able to critically think, and I feel like our conversations have been around, okay, this is what you believe. Why do you believe it? I want it to be more than just it's what your dad and I have said to you.
Yeah.
Like what verse in the Bible talks about this? Do you have a greater understanding versus just the Bible story that you've heard?
Yeah.
Because you were raised in church.
Well, critical thinking is not just understanding the definition of critical thinking. Critical thinking is something that you have to practice. And you can't practice it unless your thoughts are challenged.
Right.
That's when it becomes critical. So,
you have to own your own beliefs.
Well, yeah, and you have to be able to give a defense for them according to Scripture. So, I think that that's important, and I wish that Christian parents would understand that. If you're going to send your kid to a public school, that's good. If you choose to do that, I wouldn't agree with it, but if you choose to do that, then quit trying to change the school to be your philosophy. Because there's a lot of other people that go to that school that do not share your ideologies.
Yep.
And you wouldn't like it if some person came in there and started pushing critical theory, in one way or another. So why would you do it in the opposite direction? You're just opening the door for them to be able to do it. It's kind of like the whole thing about prayer in school. It's like parents are always on this tirade about, the school started declining when we took prayer out of school. It's like, no, it was declining way before that. As soon as the federal government took over, it was downhill from there. But think about what you're asking for before you ask that. It's like we want teachers and staff and prayer to be an open thing in school. It's like, okay, well, fair enough. But when you have that Muslim teacher and they're getting all of his kids to bow down to Mecca at lunch, don't come complaining, because you open the door for that.
Pandora's box.
Yep. And so it's not easy, man. What you guys do is not easy. Balancing the line between biblical kind of worldview and the respect of people's public rights. That's a tough road to hoe, man. People don't really understand how hard that is. How often do you think that intersects, like where you're at odds with your biblical kind of belief structure, but that you have to do something because some people's rights are enshrined by the Constitution?
I'd say it happens frequently.
Yeah.
The play at Athol is the perfect example of that. And that was a bigger issue, but you deal with the smaller things too on a daily basis. We have lots of new people to our community coming from lots of different places, and we're seeing more racism in our community than we've seen since the neo-Nazis left our area. We have little kindergartners and first graders using the N-word at school, which we've not had before, and so we're dealing with those kinds of things constantly. Where what we really try to work with our teachers and our families and our kids on is when you're here, we want you to be kind. Everybody is important. Everybody has value and worth. We may not always agree, but we can be kind to each other. That doesn't have to be your best friend, but so that's kind of the stance that we've taken. We recognize that parents have lots of choices for how they school their kids in Idaho. We have lots of charter schools, private schools. Parents can homeschool, so we understand that. We just when people are thinking about what their choices are for their kids, we want Lakeland schools to be at the top of the list.
To be at least a choice, for sure.
Yep.
Yeah, because a lot of people will dismiss, like for me, I mean, I wouldn't even consider sending my kid to a public school. But if I were given the opportunity to have a public school that was protecting my right to be able to parent my child, I might be inclined to support that as a parent. But that's rare. And I think people don't realize how much that happens in this school district, which is a shame. People really should know the work that you guys have done to promote parental rights for your kids. I mean, just the library thing. I mean, having the ability for a parent to be able to say, I want this type of book only for my child. That's a huge deal. And for it to be a la carte to each child, that's a stroke of genius is what that is.
That was Lynn's idea.
Yeah. I mean,
Good job, Lynn.
It's pretty amazing.
Sometimes it's one idea.
That's pretty impressive.
Like one of your biggest challenges is just communication with the parents and getting them to engage in these conversations. What are you doing to kind of have that open conversation with all the parents? What's working best for you? Is it electronic means? Is it in-face meetings? Is it publishing newsletters? How are you getting the word out so that everybody in your district understands how you're working on these things?
You have to have some sensational bad thing happen. Then you reach everyone.
I was going to say, I don't know that we have found that one thing. I mean, we've tried various avenues, and I think it's an a la carte situation. For some people, social media works. For some people, we have in-person meetings and they attend. For other people, it's our newsletters. I mean, we have multiple modalities of attempts, but I don't know that we have that one thing. Like when we've tried to do in person and we went around to churches and we went to various, community centers. I mean, we would get 5 to 10 people and then we'd have another meeting, some other avenue, and a bunch of people would show up. So I think it depends on what's happening in people's lives and what's going on. But I don't feel like we found that one mode that everybody responds to.
Well, I think it'll always be a challenge, just like with churches. We have trouble getting our message out to our own people, and we can't rely on any one particular channel. We have to do it all. And
we have the one thing I think that is maybe reaching more people is we have monthly meetings. We call it our parent and community advocacy group. So they come, and we have Lynn put a form on our district website where people can put questions that they want answered from the district, and so we just work our way through those questions and we record those. So then they go out on our website and people we post them on our social media. So parents who can't be there because of their work schedule or their family schedule can, while they're cooking dinner, just click play and listen to the conversation and the answers to the questions. So
we don't censor any of the questions.
Yeah, that's been helpful.
If you write it, we answer it. And again, the effort to be transparent.
Good.
I'm becoming more and more to the idea that your publications need to be more clickbaity. You just need to have clickbait in order for everybody. Because it's funny how, like, if you were to put out a mass email and a social media campaign and the whole bit and say, hey, we're going to meet down here. We're going to talk about and have a town hall meeting about all the books that we've removed from the library that don't fall in line with the Idaho state law. And we're going to show you guys all the ones that we've done, right? If you were to put that out, you would have marginal success reaching people. But you have one trans guy show up at an elementary school and everybody in the community knows.
Right.
It's like it's almost as if we have media outlets that desire to have things put out that elicit outrage because it creates views.
It works.
And so it seems
That's
to
how
me
social media works.
Well, yeah, it seems to me like if you want to make an announcement about, you're going to have a breakfast to meet with community leaders, you need to have some kind of clickbait on it so that people will actually open it up. What do you think? Can we start doing that here? Can we start getting some clickbait?
That'd be so fun.
You open it up and it's actually an advertisement for the women's ministry retreat.
Oh man. You won't believe what Pastor Chris said on Sunday.
Well, that's clickbait for sure. But yeah, it's true, man. It's like we have a hard time communicating with people too. It's just like,
well, we're living in information overload, right? And so we just we all naturally screen out the things that we don't think are important until we come across clickbait that grabs us by the throat.
It catches your eye.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Sensationalism works.
Yep.
Yeah. And that's our own fault. As people, we just need to be better at not getting dragged into that kind of nonsense. It was so easy. You look at that thing, it's like if I had not had any context from some of the communication that you had with Jim Blazin and I, it would have been like just reading the comments of what people were saying. And based off of what you were telling me, it's like you guys, you have no clue what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. You're just making things up just to be outraged. And it's like, okay, I get it, right? You had what I would consider a person that had a mental disorder, probably not dangerous, but they were at the school promoting themselves as something that they're not, obviously, to a group of children. That's a terrible, terrible thing that needs to be addressed. But man, to link it into some kind of conspiracy with the county and the federal government and all this other, I mean, some of the posts were just like, you really want there to be a problem, don't you? It's like you thrive on that. And it's a shame that we can't celebrate good news more than we get excited about bad news. Yep. I just don't understand it. Like you said, I mean, there's just no grace anymore. Mm-mm. Just no grace and no desire for good things, which is totally unbiblical because, if the things that he tells us to think about are things that are true and honest and of good report. If there be any virtue, think on these things. That's what you think on. You don't dwell on all this outrage
or slander.
Or yeah. It's just I don't really understand it. How do you guys cope with it?
We don't read social media.
That's good. That's a good idea.
You can't argue with people on social media. So once somebody puts something out there, it's the gospel truth, and then people start jumping on the bandwagon, and you can get ripped to shreds, and they don't really understand who you are, what your beliefs are, and what's actually happening. But you can't argue with people on social media. You can't win in that. So we just stay off of it.
Yep. I feel like our process over the last couple of years is just really to be reflective and not defensive and open to, were there steps along the way where we coulda, woulda, shoulda, and so that we are making better decisions instead of, obviously it can be super hurtful because people give personal attacks, and for me, like I still have a son here and we live in the community. Lisa lives in the community. So, going to the grocery store, there's definitely some people are mean-spirited. And, but I think you just have to take a step back and recognize, like, we have a job to do. Our heart's in the right place. Did we do this through the lens of trying to do what's right for kids? Do we make mistakes? Is there a lesson learned? Are there things that we can do differently? And so I think that that's the only way we can do it. And then you just have to put it on a shelf and just say, okay, we're going to do better next time. We're going to put practices in place. And so when I say we really do listen and hear and then try to come back and make changes and make systems that are going to better support our families and our students, I think that's the only thing we can do. Because otherwise it's this this horrible cycle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And honestly, taking responsibility for what you can take responsibility for.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when we haven't done it well, we have to own it, and then we do better next time.
Yeah. And understanding that, you guys are brought in as elected officials, or through the process of an elected official. And so, you're inheriting a lot of what came before you. So you're changing policy that you're inheriting. And that's not a short process. That takes a lot of time and effort and dedication. And, neither one of you guys are getting rich out of this thing. So,
well, and we could do it faster if we did it in a vacuum. And if Lynn and I just sat down with the policies and rewrote them ourselves, it would go much faster. But it's really important to us that parents have a voice. And so that takes time because you have to work through. Parents have different voices, and there are different things that are important to different families, and so that does take time, but it's the right work. So we continue to do it.
Would more parent involvement help in that process?
Absolutely.
Yep. And we have lots of avenues for parents to be involved in our school system, and so tonight we have our strategic planning committee meeting, and parents are active on that committee, helping kind of drive what's our 5-year plan with regard to our facilities, our safety, our instruction, curriculum, all of those things.
We have policy every Thursday, and it's an open forum. Whoever wants to come can come. We also send out policy revisions to anybody that's linked to Lakeland. We're brainstorming different ways that we can even get it out to people beyond just the Lakeland walls, so it's more of the community, but to provide input if they don't like something that's written in policy. And so, I mean, we are trying to include as many people in our practices and our protocols.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, we will be praying for you guys, because that's quite an endeavor, just trying to get people engaged. Do you find that it's like the same 20 parents at every meeting, basically?
Yep.
Yeah. That sounds like a church business meeting. Because that's the way it is. It doesn't matter how big you get. It's like the same 20 people are coming to this business meeting and making the decisions for the church. Yeah.
Engagement's hard.
It is.
Everybody's busy. And, sometimes it's easy to say, I just can't make it tonight, and maybe I'll go next time, and you'll be busy next time too. So, and we recognize that. We have, families or parents with young kids at home who need to make sure homework gets done and kids eat dinner and take a bath and they're ready for bed on time. So we definitely understand that, but yeah, it would be nice to have, which is why I will recommend to the board that we do our vote for the supplemental levy in November, because I do want as many of our community members as possible to have a voice in what we're doing and how we're doing it. And that's what makes the most sense to me. So
you have a much less cynical view of what's going on at home than I do. I think a fair margin of those people are coming home, their kids are sitting in front of Xbox and they're watching TV. I think it's probably what's happening in most cases.
I live in Leave It to Beaverland.
Yeah. So. That's probably a good idea, because then you just become a crotchety old grouch like me, and then you end up being cynical about everything. So
as you're seeing more retired people move into the community, are you seeing that reflected in the engagement you have with parents and families, that there are more grandparents involved in helping make decisions and provide input to the school?
I feel like we have grandparents, but I feel like we have a lot of parents as well. And I feel like the grandparents, it's in conjunction with their family. So I don't feel like we have, I'm in our schools for sure. We definitely have some kids that are with their grandparents as a guardian, but as far as actively involved in our meetings, I think it's both.
Good.
Nice. Well, we're coming up against it. I'm going to give you guys the last word. So, Lynn, you got any last words for us?
I just appreciate you guys willing to have the conversation. And although, tough conversation, I just, we're trying to do right and do the right thing, and our heart's in the right place. We have great teachers. It's a hard walk right now.
Yeah, I hear you.
Yep.
But you, Lisa?
I would echo what Lynn said. We appreciate the time to get to sit and talk to you guys. Appreciate all the prayers that you send our way, because we are walking a hard road, and as the two leaders of this district, we are responsible for the care of every single child who walks through our doors, and we, at the end of the day, have to look ourselves in the mirror and know that what we did today made a positive impact on the lives of kids.
Yeah.
And so, and that's our drive every single day, is that we're gonna take care of the kids that our parents have entrusted to us for those 6 hours that we have them.
Nice. Ken?
I just want to encourage you guys. You're doing such a great job. I'm very proud of this school district, even though I don't have kids in this school district. So whenever a conversation comes up where somebody talks about the school system or the school district, I always try to stand up for you guys, because I see you guys doing things that you don't hear about elsewhere. And you see the results of that in so many different areas. It's not just opinion. It's not just hearsay. You see it in the performance of the kids, the satisfaction of the kids, the community involvement, the news, everything that comes out. You can see positive effects and positive changes that you just can't drown out with the occasional bad story coming out. Those are going to happen. So I just want you guys to be encouraged that you have advocates here at Athol Baptist Church and in this community, and just pray that you don't get discouraged, that you don't grow weary in well-doing, that you have patient endurance to see it to the end, and that those little smiling faces are all of the payback that you need.
Yep, that's why we do what we do.
Yeah, for sure.
I do want to just say, because we have this relationship, and which I value greatly, when the thing at Athol happened, you were one of the first people I reached out to, just so you could have some context.
Yeah.
Because I know that I just knew that you, because of your being in Athol, that you would hear about it, and I wanted you to be aware of what had happened. So.
I dodged a bullet on that one. I happened to be out of town.
Oh.
Yeah, so it worked out. I think Jim got the brunt of all of that stuff, which was fine with me. I'm okay with that. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I think I would say that you guys are definitely an argument against my disdain for the public school system. It seems like there is ways that it can work if you have the right community leaders engaged in it long enough to make lasting change. You could maybe turn something around, or at least work within the parameters to make it better. But it's going to take communities getting engaged and putting in people like yourself that actually care about the kids and care about the parents. And I would just say, parents, have a conversation with these guys before you make your social media post, because it might change what you think. Instead of just responding in anger to something that you've seen on some media outlet that some person has decided to create on social media. Just be careful, and let's try and celebrate the good news a little bit more. I think it would be a great idea. Celebrate the good news a little bit more and not be so excited for outrage. Because it would help everybody out, I think, in the long run. Mm-hmm. So, but I appreciate what you guys are doing. It's the Lord's work, what you're doing down there. And just keep at it and keep encouraged, and we'll do the best that we can to continue to keep the word going. So
we appreciate
you.
Well, that about does it for us today. As always, thank you for joining us. If you have a comment or a question or an idea for an episode, send us an email to 3p@atholbaptistchurch.org. If your idea gets used on the show, you could be the proud recipient of the now world-famous 3P coffee mug. If you enjoyed this episode, please give it a like, share it with your friends, and subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. And again, thanks to Athol Baptist Church and its members for their generous support of this ministry. And again, thank you for listening. And until next time, remember the Great Commission. Go into all the world, reach the lost with the gospel, and build disciples who could do the same. And with that, We are out.